may have one more in local arts, not quite sure yet. That when it's an issue on our end and not their end, we are a little flexible with that deadline. Though we wish that, we could have enough of a heads up in time not to deal with it on the day of the deadline, but there it is. So just wanted to give you all a quick kind of report in. When we go into your, we're going to ask you to log into Smart Simple and go to your dashboard, and you're going to see applications in under review status. Heads up, local arts panel. Of the 30 that we ended up, based on your scores, inviting into phase 2, 25, maybe 26, have completed phase 2 applications for your review. In arts education, we have 20. In folk and traditional arts, we have 6. And we have 13 in the folk arts apprenticeship program. Caitlin, did you want to say something about the display issue that Smart Simple is working on with applicant names appearing in the pending menu?
Oh, you know what? That was a note from last year, and I hope that it's still not an issue. So when we go through and I share my
Awesome.
screen and show everyone what to expect to see on their end, I think that it is resolved, but I will double check that.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So we've chosen one application that has been submitted to walk through with you so you understand the process and know what to look for. But before, okay, so why don't we pull up that lovely PowerPoint so I don't go off in multiple directions. And before we get deep into this, does anybody have any burning questions that you want to ask right out of the gate? Or are you ready to sit back and learn a little bit more about this part? Okay. Hearing nothing, although feel free to interrupt. Alrighty, let's move through this beautiful PowerPoint that you created, Caitlin. So just to kind of reground us into this particular program, this is a project grant program that encourages arts education, cultural understanding, community arts development, and it is projects, not general operating support. And the focus of this particular program has a community development thread running through it, in that we ask the applicants to make sure they're working with the community rather than having a great idea for the community and making it happen without really checking in with the community's needs, etc. So we focus the projects, as you know, in those 3 areas of arts ed, folk and traditional arts, and local arts. Grants, the minimum grant that we make in this program is $1,500. So the smallest budget that you'll see in any program, any of the components, is $3,000. The maximum that we make is $6,000, and that could be part of a much larger grant, a much larger project, but they can only ask us for $6,000, and they will need, of course, to match it. Where our matching requirements are flexible in that if half of their match must be in cash, but the other half could be in-kind donations, whether that's volunteer time or other kinds of contributions, but they do need to have at least half of their match to our grant in cash. Most of them will have far more than half of their match in cash, but just so you know, that is certainly allowed, and it evens the playing field a little bit for folks. There's a 3-year limit for projects. We talked about this in phase 1 too. If a project has been going on for longer than 3 years, then we assume that it's become sort of a program, and they find other ways to continue supporting that. If they have been doing a project and they're interested in continuing it, but they want to add a new component to that project, say a visual arts festival, and now they want to add a performing arts component to it in year 4, that's totally fine. They can come to us, but they can only ask us for that performing arts component. They can't ask us for the basic festival costs right? So it's just a sort of easy example for that 3-year limit. Caitlin, have I missed anything so far?
No, I don't think so. And there's a couple that in phase 1, I tried to, check in on that project year and see if it, should this actually be a new component? So I will do the same in phase 2. I haven't had a chance to do that yet. But no, I think you covered it.
Okay, great. If it is in phase, if it is in year 2 or year 3, we certainly hope that they are sharing with you all something that they've learned in the earlier years of the thing. That's an indication that they are actively evaluating the work, actively connecting in to make sure they're meeting their goals intentionally, rather than just kind of being in the swim of it and not raising their heads to really check in and make sure their path is still the right one. And if they don't, then that's generally a point of concern for panelists, that they don't reference what they've learned from a previous year of the
And
project.
I'll just jump in there, and I think we'll see this when we walk through an application, but I think based on panelist feedback, we've sort of built that, more formally into the application process. So if they are a new component, we, explicitly ask, tell us how this is a new component of an existing project. So hopefully that is helpful to you all as review panelists.
Yeah, and just to underscore again, one of the things that we appreciate about your work is not only your review of the applications, but at the end of each of the panel days. So like at the end of the local arts panel meeting in April, later April, we'll sit down and have you evaluate what's working, what isn't, what you needed to see that you didn't see, what you saw that really wasn't helpful, things like that. So we will ask for your insight in that part of the process too.
Erin,
Jumping
could I
back,
jump in with a
yeah,
quick question?
Yeah.
sure.
One of the things I noticed in phase 1, and this is my first time doing it, is that question of eligibility and like, is this a new project enough to qualify for? And so I had that question sometimes in my feedback. Should we assume that for this phase 2 that that's been worked out, that we don't need to question that, or not necessarily?
So not necessarily. If there's some, I would encourage you to connect in with me or Caitlin on
Okay.
that if you have a question. If it's not clear that this is something beyond what they normally do, or that they've been doing it for a long time, that please clarify or ask us, and if we have any insight, we'll share. But it really is on them to explain that to you. Everyone, as far as we know, everyone who is in this phase 2 is eligible, and their project at least meets the very, very basic criteria. Whether it is strong enough to receive funding or to receive your recommendation of funding, is where you all come in.
Great. Thank you.
But do ask if you question it, please.
Okay, I will.
This year especially, there's a lot of moving parts for us, and so we appreciate that. Caitlin, anything else on any of that? Okay, well then let's talk about the applications and the fact that because there are 5 of you on each panel, we have a primary and secondary panelist system. So primary readers, you will receive a fifth of the applications as the primary reader and a fifth of the applications as the secondary reader. And then the rest of the applications, you are a panelist. So your input is important. Your scores are as important as all the other scores, but the burden of presenting and leading the conversation is not yours for those applications. So primary readers will start off, I or the panel chair will say, and now we're getting to this applicant from this city and they're requesting this amount. And then you say, as primary reader, you start the conversation. These are the strengths I saw. These are the weaknesses I saw. It's so the list is sort of here, and we'll make this list available in an email to you after this too, if it just kind of helps kickstart your thoughts about what you want to say. And then once you've kind of taken 2 minutes, which is challenging because there are only 10 minutes per application discussion in the day. You've done the work ahead of time and you've brought your thoughts to this discussion. The primary reader kicks off the conversation in 2 minutes or less, then turns to the secondary reader who adds their comments on the strengths and weaknesses. And often that is a ditto what they said, or oh, that's interesting, I had a very different read on this. This is what I saw. Or yes, what the primary reader said, plus I noticed these things. So that's kind of the secondary reader's approach. And then we open it up to the full panel discussion, and the other 3 panelists get to chime in with their thoughts related to the application. When the discussion is finished, And our panel chairs are generally very good timekeepers. So they'll give you a 2-minute warning when the 10 minutes are about to elapse. And then you will turn to your score sheets, which we'll be looking at shortly. And you'll finish those up and then submit them. Once we have all 5 of them, then we move on to the next application. Caitlin, I skimmed over a bunch. Anything else on that?
I'll just say that this is really similar to the phase 1 process, where in, that sort of initial review process, you're reviewing, a thorough review of all of the applications. You can write any comments that you have, any concerns, feedback in the evaluation form. You will submit that by noon, and I think that's what the next slide is, the day ahead of the panel meeting. But on the day of the panel is when you'll actually submit the numerical scores. So Karen mentioned, we can see on our end that everyone has submitted. That is, the day of the panel meeting. I'm going to go ahead and just skip on to the next one because it has those dates. But like I said, same process where you're not actually entering the numerical scores ahead of the panel day of the panel meeting. You're just entering any comments, questions, concerns. There's also a section, and I want to make sure it's in the initial review and in the final review piece, but where you can just add notes to yourself, that you want to, maybe as a primary reader, what you want to make sure to outline in, as you get the discussion started. But I think that covers it otherwise.
I will say, and please, those of you who have served as panelists before, feel free to chime in. The general wisdom from past panelists is to start with the applications that you've been assigned to as primary reader. So reading those first, kind of getting a sense of how long it takes you to review one. And if you can get to that within the next, few days, certainly it will help you then gauge the amount of time that you need to set aside for the rest of your review. Some panelists take a long time to review each, and some panelists kind of get into a role and just find that it moves quicker as they get into more of them. So there's that. Anything else from previous panelists in terms of what you would recommend about reviewing? All righty, no pressure. I'm looking at notes here. All right. We've talked about the fact that the secondary readers add their voice at the top of the discussion. I will also say that if something unforeseen happens, and this has happened in the past, where a panelist has had a last-minute family emergency or something and has not been able to serve on the day of, then the secondary reader steps forward and becomes the presenter for the applications, those primary presenters. They're the primary reader. So that's how that works. And same, if a secondary reader has to step out, then the primary reader carries that discussion and then turns to the full panel. We hope that won't happen for any of the panels this year. All right. Do we want to just open in go through the application form right now, Caitlin?
Yeah.
Or is
Yep.
there anything else we want to share? While you're opening that up, oh, sorry, do you have more of your PowerPoint slides we should look at?
No, I think that the next one is probably just that I'm going to share my screen here. So give me
Awesome.
just 1 minute to do that.
I will, and I will also say there's some issues that have come up in phase 1 with some of these, and in our work with some of the applicants in phase 2 that we wanted to make sure we just outlined right here for you guys and articulated. Know, please, that in arts education, projects don't need to serve the entire K through 12 body of students. They can be focused on just one grade or age group, and that's perfectly fine with us. The applicant needs to explain, of course, why they've chosen that and how it makes sense for the project, but it's fine with us. One question that came up also was for organizations that are not, that note that they're not licensed to fundraise in Wisconsin, what's that all about? And the answer is some groups, before we start asking this question out loud, we just kind of made the assumption in many years ago that people, knew that as nonprofits, they needed to do that to register to fundraise. And we found out a number of years ago that that was not true. So we've added this question in so that we're able to help them get registered. So they are in fact doing the right thing and adhering to the law and being registered to fundraise. Know that units of local government, like a library or higher ed, they don't need to have a license to fundraise. That is embedded sort of within their structure. And so sometimes they don't know that, so they click no, but they're legit and it's fine. We also had a question about large budget projects done by small budget organizations. So every now and then we have especially projects that are driven by passionate artists or passionate visionary community members who have a lot of connections with other people who share their passion. Those are usually, there are sometimes very small, lean and mean organizations who have just enough money to get the work done, not a lot of cushion, not a lot of whatever, because they're just doing the projects. And when they take on a new project, sometimes that project is significantly larger than their general operating budget. And they generally pull those projects off. But it's something that they need to reassure you about. If you are concerned that they might not be able to have the fiscal capacity to run it. You'll look at how long the organization has been doing what it's doing, and if it's been doing it for years, then you can have a pretty good sense that they're able to pull this off. If they're brand new and they're taking on something that's huge, and they don't have the track record of doing that kind of work in the community successfully, then that can be a red flag for you. That came up, that question, from a few of you, so we wanted to make sure we articulated it specifically. All righty,
Are you seeing my screen here, Karen, as Jared?
I am.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to emulate as Jared since he's not able to join us, and he's a folk arts panelist. So you will see the 6 Creative Communities project grants and then the 13 folk arts apprenticeship grants here as well. And I am just going to go ahead and open one of these Creative Communities grants, and it's going to be, again, same as in phase 1. When you open the grant, you will see just the evaluation, the scoring and comment sheet. So to view, I prefer the split screen option. To view it in split screen, you can use this options tab up in the left-hand corner, or you can always click that application summary, and that will generate a PDF of the application if you just prefer to view it that way. But the applicant tab, again, a lot of this is carryover kind of boilerplate information from phase 1. So most of this will not have changed. They may have filled in, or I think everyone had it completed in phase 1, the mission statement and organization history piece. But if they did not, it will be here under this applicant information tab. That nonprofit license to fundraise that Karen mentioned, I think, everyone should have selected yes at this point for the most part, but we will double check on those today or early next week. And then if they're using, this applicant happens to be using a fiscal receiver, if they are, the fiscal receiver information will be here. If not, and in most cases it's not, so you don't really need to worry about the fiscal receiver piece. Community demographics is really just sort of, we ask them to offer a little more context to the community in which the proposed project will occur. And we do ask for both a link to, I'm gonna scroll down, some census information, that's again, some additional context, but then community description about, the role that they serve within their own community. And then this community, major businesses or activities that support your community's project, again, context to the environment that they are working in and the role of their organization or their project in that environment. Karen, any comments on the applicant information tab or that community description piece?
No, any questions from you all?
Great, and I will just.
Kantara
Yeah.
had a question in the
Yeah.
chat. She asked when you would find out whether you're going to, what your primary and secondary reader
Oh, good
assignments are.
question.
And that will be, if I'm really on my game, the local arts people will see their assignments by the end of today. And if not, then first thing on Monday. But you will have access to all of the applications today.
I'm going to say the same, and I'm going to say it's likely on Monday, but you do now have access to all of the applications. So I'm going to click on over to the project details tab. You can either, again, just like in phase one, use these headers here, or you can use this next arrow down here. Project details, a lot of this is carryover from phase one. So the year of the project title, start and end dates, and then this is actually the summary that they submitted in phase one. So you're welcome to reread that if you want a refresher of maybe what they proposed in phase one versus what they're proposing in phase two. It might have, developed a bit more from then, but I would say don't feel obligated to reread those phase one summaries
Yeah.
that you're just here in the project details.
And the same with the amount that they thought they would request funding. That grant amount may have changed between their planning in February and now. So this really is just a reference if you're really curious about what they said originally. But otherwise, just focus on the narrative piece. And that,
I think on the project details tab, there's this sort of projection of artists involved and people served that will be new information, but again, otherwise it's really just a summary of that phase one material. The bulk of the application here is in the narrative section.
Caitlin, I'm going to interrupt for just a
Yeah.
sec and say about the number of people served. Please know that for the Arts Board, the projects that serve lots and lots of people in a sort of broad, sort of surface way are great, as are projects that serve much fewer people, but in a really focused and intense kind of way that may have reverberations in the community past the project. So another way of saying that is that hundreds of people don't have to be served by a project for us to think that it's valuable and worth investing in. It can be a very small group of people. If it's a very small group of people, then you'll want to know how the community will benefit, the larger community will benefit from that small group work. The nature of some projects mean that the group numbers that are participating in the project have to be small. Again, depending on privacy issues, depending on lots of different things. And so it is on you to decide whether or not, even though this project is serving 10 people, but in a really deep way that will ripple out and have an effect on the community in different ways over time, whether that is strong enough, whether the case they make is strong enough for you to say, yeah, I'm going to recommend funding for this particular project, even though it's a small group of people right now. And then obviously the broader, more exposure type projects, you make the call there too, whether it's valuable to the community. So yeah. Anything else on that, Caitlin? There was something, but I can't remember. That might have been it.
I think that's it. Yeah, that's helpful there. From there, again, the narrative piece here, the narrative and the budget are kind of the verbal portion, and then the numerical half of the proposal. I won't read through each of these.
Can
but
you just do Caitlin, it's so small. Can we like not see ourselves and just see the screen share? Is that possible? If it's not possible, I'm sorry. I should know that by now, but I don't.
I think because I'm sharing my whole screen here, I'm not sure. I can try to zoom in a little bit.
Can you all see this okay?
It's all right for me. I usually change the view on the top right to say, you know, to make the view of the speakers smaller. And that sometimes
Okay.
will make the actual share bigger.
Okay, let me,
That sometimes helps.
I
Thank
thought
you.
that I did that. And again, I
You
can't see
know,
what you're seeing, so it's
if I
hard.
click, I'm sorry, it's probably me. If I click standard, suddenly I see a lot more on
Karen,
that.
Karen, are you on full screen? Or can you select full screen?
Yep. And if it's not a problem for you
Okay.
guys, then I'm gonna just stop talking.
Mine's good.
What can everyone else see? Because I see, I have two monitors here, so I only see the second screen of mine that I believe you're seeing.
Yeah, it's working fine for me. And
Okay.
if I click standard, I have a full screen view. So
Perfect.
Okay. I'm just gonna sit here and drink my coffee.
I usually just
While I wait.
play around with the standard, and right now I'm in side-by-side speaker, and just play around and see what works.
Cool.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. So yeah, the narrative portion here, we say limit it to 2,000 words. And I'm not going to read through each of these, but it really is, you know, key details about the project. For the arts ed projects, I believe there's one extra question about assessing the arts. Oh, and I'm blanking on the language. What is it? Basically related to, you know, if it's in a school project, if it's occurring within a school, if they are, how they are incorporating or how they are following arts standards that relate to the project, or how they're otherwise doing assessment of the arts learning component of the project. So that is the one additional question here for arts ed, but otherwise the questions are consistent, you know, throughout. Karen, any comments about the narrative other than it's the, you know, half of the budget is the other component here to the narrative, I would say?
Yeah, yeah, I
Um,
appreciate the analogy, Caitlin. The narratives are the word portion of the
Trying.
proposal and the budget are the numbers portion, and they better align. And if
Yes.
they don't align, that's a red flag for y'all.
So here we do ask for their organizational budgets, and in the support materials, we, you know, this is a summary of those, you know, most recently completed current and next fiscal year organizational budgets. I think that in many cases, and I had a handful of questions about this in phase 2, the next fiscal year will likely look, you know, very similar to the current fiscal year if they've just not, it's just a projection at this point. But they will include a detailed organizational budget for those 3 years in the support materials section. But that is really just, you know, again, more context about how that project fits into the larger picture of the organization's work. And we do ask them to note, you know, if there are any significant surplus deficit, to note, you know, that here. And as you'll see in this one, it may very well may relate to some, you know, COVID still at this point. So I'm going to keep scrolling down to the project budget. This is really the key piece here for what they are proposing and what they are requesting. They will include any income related to the project here, and then their itemized expenses. And I think the most helpful portion is this bottom piece. You can really see, you know, we require a balanced budget. So the total income should match the total expenses, and it does here. And then and I'm catching an error right off the bat because they're only requesting 6,000. So this portion of grant applied should only be 6,000. I'm not sure why it's 13,000 here. I will connect in with that applicant this morning. But this portion of grant applied is, you know, these are the Arts Board funds. This is how we are requesting to use those, you know, 6,000 or 3,000, whatever it might be. But again, should not exceed 6,000 here on portion of grant applied.
I'm
So
glad, actually, I'm glad that it
Yeah.
was one of these that we have to walk them through. I caught a number of these yesterday as well. People who are new to the application process, new to budgeting in this way, just didn't quite understand and didn't have time apparently to look at the video Q&A because they're busy, and so we get to work with them. And if you see any that we haven't addressed directly, with you all, with a follow-up saying, hey, this budget is now ready or whatever, just let us know to make sure that we're on it. But we will work with the applicants today or Monday to figure out if there are any glitches like this. Again, this is more of a seasoned grant proposal writer versus a newbie, and we are welcoming all. And so if it's a newbie and someone who isn't used to these kinds of things, part of our work is to help them kind of figure this out for future grant applications to other funders as well. So no damage here.
So from there, I will jump over to board and staff. So we do ask them to list out board members, any, city, any arts affiliation, if there, is a specific arts affiliation there. We do ask if they have paid or volunteer staff, and then we ask them to list out their staff. And some, for some of these huge organizations, it will be more the key folks involved in the project here. And then we do ask again in the support materials section for bios of those really key folks that are working on the project. Karen, notes about board or staff?
Just know that we also say how many years has this board member been on the board, so you have a sense of the community engagement piece there, and the nature of the organization. If you have a lot of boards where you have board members who've been there for 10+ years and not a lot of new people, that tells you something about the organization more than the project, but it's a point of a context, and you decide how helpful it is to you as you assess the quality of the project and the likelihood that the project will be successful.
All right, so accessibility, this is sort of related to access of the project activities as well as accessibility of particular, a particular facility or location where the project is taking place. And that is fairly straightforward there. I will keep on scrolling over to evaluation. This is, in phase one, they sort of check the boxes of the evaluation methods that they would use. This is the really kind of who, when, and where details of each of those evaluation tools that they identified in phase one. And work samples. So you will see what they might have uploaded in phase one, and then in phase two, if they had additional digital images that they've uploaded here, or if they had additional links, they will have included them there. Audio files, I'm not sure that there were any literary works uploaded, but if there were, they would be there. And then
At the very bottom there, Caitlin,
yeah,
some applicants have decided to describe their work samples at the very, very bottom instead of within the. Just a tip for panelists to scroll all the way to the bottom of this particular tab in case they add some additional description and information there. We had a few applicants that weren't quite sure where to put it.
Great, yes, and you should see there should be some, title, a year created, and a description of the uploads, at least the images that they've uploaded here. And then support material. So that says that 3 years of org budget that I mentioned, the real detailed organizational budgets, they will have uploaded them there. The key artistic administrative personnel biographies. If there is a significant partner organization, they will upload a letter of commitment from that organization. That's not the case with all projects, but it is the case here.
Just to pause for a moment, it's actually the case in relatively few projects.
Yeah.
So we ask them to submit a letter from a significant partner if it's clear that the project isn't going to happen without that partner. And this is a reassurance to you that they have in fact been talking and that partner is on board, et cetera, et cetera. We're not looking for, letters of funders or people who love the project or whatever. We're looking for, if there's an arts group that wants to perform and go deep within a community center and the people they serve, then that community center should be sharing a letter saying, yes, we're on board and we're making this happen with this arts group kind of thing. But generally speaking, you're not going to see a lot of letters from significant partners, I don't think.
Yeah. And then some sample evaluation materials. We asked them to upload a recent sample or current sample of one of those evaluation methods that they mentioned in a previous tab. And then optional support materials. So, I think we say no more than 4 of these, but this might be a letter of support. This might be here, a newsletter, a press release, just some other additional support material that they would like to present along with the project proposal. And Karen, any other?
Yeah, while we encourage you to explore this support materials tab as much as you want, as you're interested, unless you're a primary or secondary reader, you probably won't be spending a lot of time on this page. You don't have to go deep into the organizational budgets that they're uploading unless you have a question or a concern. Same for the artist bios, that kind of thing. So this is a tab that primary readers will spend time on for their applications, and you all can, and that's awesome. But if you're finding this is a bit onerous, then this is an area that you can go light on.
Right. And then no need to pay attention to the certification tab, really. This is kind of
Nope.
where they sign off that,
Yep.
you can see this certification statement here, but I would not.
Just be
concern
reassured
yourself
that
with
we've got that handled and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. That is the application. It is comprehensive for sure, but please reach out, as Karen said, as you start to work through these applications, if you have specific questions or Samara, as you mentioned, eligibility questions, just please reach out to us. And then on the right-hand side here, same, really similar to phase 1 is the actual scoring and comment sheet. So you will fill in comments for each of the criterion here. It is required for each. So, if there's one that you don't have a specific comment for, just feel free to say NA or, put an X in there just to move forward with the initial review. There is this additional comments section. So if you have notes on what might strengthen the proposal or other specific constructive comments or questions that you'd like us to convey to the applicant, that'd be great. A lot of times those are also conveyed verbally in the actual panel meeting. So, if you want to note them here, great. It's helpful as a note to yourself if it's something you want to be sure to bring up in the discussion. But just know that those are also required fields before you're able to go ahead and hit submit initial review. And at that point, just like in phase 1, that application will then kind of bounce from pending to initial review. And on the day of the panel meeting, we will ask, you should have, for the folk arts folks, 19 initial reviews, and you will open them, add your, any additional comments and your numerical scores in the initial review. And then once you submit, that will be you'll be finished at that point, the final review on the day of the panel meeting, after the discussion of each application. Karen, other comments?
Yeah, can you go back to the comment sheet for a sec?
Yeah.
Thank you. It's really, really important that one of the reasons we kind of lay out the criteria within that comment sheet is for you to just, again, kind of center you on what we are asking them to supply. If you have a concern about a project or an application, but we haven't asked them to supply that information, then we ask that you don't downgrade them for not supplying it because we haven't asked them for it. If you have some suggestions on what might make the project stronger, even if we haven't asked for it, that second page, can you go there again, Caitlin, on the comment sheet? Yeah, that's where you can put that. And then stuff that's completely, a lot of times we have panelists who are excited about projects or concerned about projects or whatever, and they have some ideas that they want to share, but it's not really related to a criterion. It's not really appropriate to put in those comment boxes. This final box is where you can put those. If you want to say, hey, have you thought about, or whatever, this is a really good place to put that. And you don't have to do that at all, but if you wanna, it's there. Caitlin, we do not have that box at the very top of this thing to
I
help
know.
them do their panel kind of primary presenter notes. We will see if we can get that in here. Is that possible to
Yeah,
promise?
I know
in
that
the
it's
document?
once you submit your initial review, if you open it, it's visible, but that doesn't really help because you're
It's not
adding
really helpful
comments
right
ahead
now,
of the
right.
panel meeting. So I will get in touch.
So what
with some
Caitlin and I are
people.
talking about is at the top of this comment sheet, our original design has a box for you to just put your primary reader notes. So when you are ready to do your presentation at the panel meeting and say, okay, this project is about this and your sort of really small Reader's Digest version, you have a box that you can just reference right there. If up until now, panelists have like just made notes in other places and they reference it, but we've had enough panelists say, hey, it'd be really handy to have this on the actual comment sheet, that we have designed that box. We're just not sure where it is right now, but we'll see if we can get it to you for this part of the review. All right. We've put a lot of information out in front of you
Yes.
and you've absorbed a lot. So we're going to stop talking and see what questions you have at this point.
Karen, I just wanted to confirm, is the primary panelist introducing the project, or like last year, is the chair introducing the project and then the primary is launching into the comments?
I think it will depend on how excited our panel chair is.
Okay.
So be prepared to
All
do
good.
it, but we may have, right, exactly. You'll
Yep,
be the one who
understood.
says, this project is about this. These are the strengths I saw. These are the weaknesses I saw. Thank you, Maggie. I know.
Just clarifying for my brain. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. Other questions or comments? All right, I think we can probably close off this screen sharing then. Oh, yeah, there we
There's a
go.
few more.
Thank
There's a
you.
bit more.
Look
We
at
have
that.
10 more
Look at that.
minutes.
Take it away.
I will quickly move through the rest of this,
Yeah.
but you've seen your conflict of interest forms. If you, especially for folk arts panelists, because there are now 13 individuals in the mix for the apprenticeships, please just go through that list. And if you see any additional conflicts, let me know. I will add them to the list and I will note that as a conflict of interest. But we basically say that if you would financially benefit, or if you have someone with whom, if there's a familial relationship there, we would ask you to identify that as a conflict. And it's always best to just avoid any perception of conflict. So please reach out if you have questions about a potential conflict of interest there.
Quick question.
Yeah.
If the conflict of interest that we had and wrote down to you,
Mhm.
first round carried over to the second, do I assume I don't look at that one?
Yeah, and I believe that if I noted you have a conflict in phase 1, you probably won't see the phase 2 application either. It won't be on your
Okay,
slate to review.
it was listed
Was
under
it?
my,
Okay.
that's why I was asking. Yeah.
Okay. I will double check on that. Thank you. But yes,
Okay,
if you
sure.
know, don't even worry about that one though, if you
Okay.
identified it in phase 1.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Any other comments there? Okay, we do, conflict of interest is kind of a good segue into a really quick overview of implicit bias or unconscious bias and how this might show up in the review process. And I think that you are all likely very familiar with implicit bias, but these are unconscious learned assumptions, beliefs, attitudes that can affect our judgment, decisions, and behavior, and are, influenced by our backgrounds and cultural environment and personal experiences. So, these are most often used as mental shortcuts for faster information processing, but we do just want to call attention to the ways that bias might show up in the review process in hopes of limiting the effect of bias. So these are developed over time, as we accumulate life experiences and are exposed to different stereotypes. And, they can both encompass favorable and unfavorable assessments. They are activated involuntarily. And we just want to call out a few examples of what it might look like. Affinity bias, I think you will likely think about this in terms of hiring practices often, but it's basically that the effect that you identify with those applicants with whom you share characteristics. So, in some cases, like an artistic preference, or there's a discipline that you work in, or a certain artistic style that you practice, we lean on that a little bit, that expertise, I'd say, especially in the apprenticeship reviews. That's really important information that you bring to the table in the review process. But I think that it can also make you sometimes more critical of those working in that artistic discipline, or that, those with whom you share those characteristics. So we just want to call attention to it. I have some examples of, other places it might show up in the process. But again, I think that we all use these mental shortcuts, and we're not immune to it. So we just like to call attention to it. Another example is that positive, negative moment of influence. So it might be that you have some prior experience of the applicant or the organization. It might be that there's one statement or one question that they respond to that can kind of shape the way that you view the rest of the application. So again, that's very human. We're just asking you to be conscious of it as you're reviewing the applications, and really stick to the evaluation, the criteria, and what we are asking of them in the actual application. Another, stereotyping, I don't think that this really requires much of an explanation, but, when an opinion about an applicant's gender, race, artistic discipline, culture, language, et cetera, sort of influences your evaluation of that application, we are just asking you to be really conscious of that as you work through. And there's a lot of overlap here, but, as we think about applicants who, as we think about academic iteration, applicants who have that grant writing experience, we see this a lot in the apprenticeships, but in the creative communities applications as well. There are folks who have applied to this program in the past, have submitted successful applications. There are organizations that have grant writers on staff, and there are organizations that do not. And we are just asking that you be aware of any bias that you might have toward those organizations, those, potentially larger organizations, or individual applicants who are really well versed in the application process, and to just be conscious of that as you are reviewing these applications. Like I said, I think that a lot of this is fairly straightforward. I think that you all have likely had all kinds of implicit bias training, but we just want to call attention to it. So if you have specific questions as you work through them, again, please reach out. I think in terms of limiting the effects of implicit bias, we say, be mindful, take your time as you work through them, frame any and all feedback constructively. We ask that you do adhere to the review criteria for all applications, and that you just, review each application on its own without comparison to others, in your pool of applicants this year. And Karen and I do like to note that we just want to support as many strong projects as possible, and that the goal is really to get funding out into the state to these organizations providing high quality arts programming. So again, if you have questions, please reach out prior to the panel meeting. And, we also like to note, and I don't think that you would do this, but please do not contact an applicant. If you have questions, reach out to us.
One thing that we didn't mention really quickly, when you are reviewing, at the end of the day, you will see you're gonna score. We're gonna average your scores, and then we're gonna show you at the end of the day what that list looks like. So the applicant that received the highest scores at the top with that score all the way down, and then you're going to be asked to set the floor beneath which you are not recommending a grant. And so that's why Caitlin's, we just mentioned, we tend to favor more applications around the state versus a smaller group. But one thing we gift you with, you don't have to figure out the dollar amounts. We're not going to say we have this much money available in this pot and now it's up to you to apportion it. We're going to say we're running a formula. And we are taking your score into account. We're taking the number of applications that you have recommended for funding into account. We're taking all of these things into account. We got this. You don't have to worry about it. So what your job at the end of the day is, just when you thought your work was over, was to set the floor. And you say, you know what? There's a clear score difference between this application and this application. It seems like all the applications below this point received much lower scores or significantly lower scores. And so there's some panels that have recommended all of the applications, depending on that. As we said, if you're invited into phase 2, the implication is the panel believes that your project is strong enough to merit funding. You now need to make the case to make sure that that happens. And then we've had panels where they've come and said, oh my goodness, phase 2 applications in this situation, this project was not nearly as strong as I thought it was, so we're not going to recommend these. We'll get more into that on the day of. Thank you all. Any questions? I see a couple in the chat. Let's see, what do we got? Oh, okay. Yep. All right. Aaron and Samara had to head out, and we are at 2 minutes to 10. Yikes. Yeah. Anything else on the PowerPoint, Caitlin?
I think the only other piece is that we just ask you to remember that financial need is not one of the criteria that you'll be, evaluating these applications on. So just keep that in mind. No, I think that those are really, oh, here's another other things to keep in mind, please.
I think we've gone through this
I
actually
think we've really
already.
covered all
Yep.
of this. So no, I think that that is it from us. Before we jump in for the couple of you that are Fogarts panelists, I'll ask you to just stay on for a few more minutes. But I think that covers it
Questions,
for everyone else. Other questions?
questions. I'm going to change my view so I can see everybody. All right. Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay, great. You know how to reach us. You'll be seeing an agenda for your panel meeting date from me, hopefully by the end of today, but if not, on Monday, and from Caitlin early next week for those 2 panels. And that will give you a sense of the flow of that day. I'm just doing the math really quickly. I'm betting that we are going to have a 5.5 hour, potentially 6 hour panel meeting for the local arts panel. And we generally start around 8:30, which is going to take us to about 2:30 or 3, depending on what you need for lunch, that kind of thing. It's via Zoom. So I will craft that agenda and that time frame and your primary and secondary reader assignments and send it all in one lovely Excel spreadsheet to you soon. And Caitlin will do the same. All righty. No other questions?